remind you that because this is a memorial service, please turn off your cell phones and please no applause. Sal Goldstein, Abe Schweiger, and most recently, Charlie Lipschitz, passionate, insistent leaders of Sheerit Hapleitah. Many of us came into adulthood knowing these men, who along with our parents spearheaded a relentless campaign of remembrance. And now, with Charlie Lipschitz's passing, we must carry on. Charlie was not only a leader, he was a gatherer of people from all walks of life who were inspired by Charlie's passion to become involved in how we remember our lost families. Charlie was a bridge builder, reaching out to the greater Jewish community to ensure that his determination to remember would not fade once Charlie was no longer with us. Thanks to Charlie's efforts, we are all here, together to continue educating and to continue remembering. And now we add Charlie's life to those we must remember. To remember is crucial, but memory is such a strange place to keep all the remnants of what we have lost. Yom HaShoah, a day of remembrance, didn't have to be created for survivors or descendants of survivors to remember. You who survived, and those of us who have shown your defiance by building families, we remember on a daily basis. The memory is never put away. The point of Yom HaShoah is to make sure that the world, not just the Jews, not just those who lived during the Holocaust, but that all future generations remember the horror of when extreme evil and hatred prospered on this earth, and the lessons we must learn from that history. We cannot teach the world history lessons. We must teach the world the lessons of that history. So why is memory such a strange place for remembrance? Our memory of all that was lost cannot only stay within our memory. Our memory must be out there, in our stories, in our conversations, in our schools, in our workplaces, in our homes. We must be as relentless as our leaders once were in ensuring that the world knows what happened, knows how it could have been prevented, knows how it was resisted by Jews, knows how there were Jewish and non-Jewish heroes, knows how our people have survived and gone on to continue helping one another, our communities, our nation, and the world. Our memory must become their memory. What we lost must be recognized as more than a number, 6 million Kadoshim. It must be recognized as the loss of doctors, of lawyers, of mothers, of teachers and rabbis, artists and authors, and children whose potential for fixing this world will never be known. Memory of the Holocaust must be about naming the evil wherever it occurred and the capacity to overcome evil. Memory of the Holocaust must be about being proactive, relentless, and restless. Those we remember would have wanted that. After all, we are here for a reason. We ask you to join us as we carry on the passion of our leaders, may they rest in peace, and insisting that others know what and who we are remembering, and inspiring others to act to stop evil and hatred as it tries to spread. Survivors, not only your children and grandchildren will know your loss and your suffering, your heroism and your stories. We will gather others together and build bridges to recount what was lost and what must never be lost again. I'd like to introduce the Boy Scout Troop 62, led by Kevin Ball of the Northeast Illinois Council of Boy Scouts of America, as well as our heroic Jewish war veterans who are here, who have presented colors. Now I ask you all to rise for the national anthem and Hatikva.
what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars to the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, them up bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Lord, but live of anyone, nefesh Yehudi omiyah, ulfate Mizrach kadima, ayin lezion Sophia.
Thank you, Chazu Reitman, and thank you for the accompaniment from Michael Heimlich. The Honorable Governor Bruce Rauner could not be here today as he is conducting a trade mission in Germany and Poland. He has sent us a video message, which we'll see now on the screen, and afterwards, we'll hear from the Honorable Lieutenant Governor Evelyn Sanguinetti.
Hello. I wish I could be with you this weekend for Yom HaShoah, but I assure you that for me, this will be the most moving Holocaust remembrance of my life. I'm traveling in Poland, and as you gather today, I'll have just completed visits to Auschwitz and the site of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I'm quite certain that seeing these places, where such evil atrocities took place, will horrify and humble us. Yet, with thanks to Adonai and reverence toward the 6 million we lost, they will also bestow a resolve to always stand in defiance of discrimination and bigotry. Our resolve must stay rock solid as anti-Semitism is rising in so many places around the world, including the U.S. and unfortunately in Illinois. In the chaos and uncertainty of our times, intolerance has reared its hateful self. At this time then, from this hallowed place, I prayerfully implore us all to reject destructive, prejudicial forces. They have no place in our world, no place in a free society. To remember is not only to look back, but also to look ahead and renew our commitments to tell the stories of the Holocaust to our children. Our children need to know hate cannot be left unchallenged. They need to understand that silence is the ally of oppression. They must be taught that even in darkness, there is the possibility of light. It is a privilege to join you and Jewish communities across the world on this day of remembrance. Let our resolve grow, and let us pray that we are never again, singularly or collectively, afflicted by indifference to human suffering. God bless you and the Skokie Agudath Jacob Synagogue. My prayers are with you tonight and always.
Evelyn Sanguinetti was sworn in as Illinois' 47th Lieutenant Governor on January 12, 2015. She is currently the highest-ranking Latina in the history of the state of Illinois. She is a working mother of 3, an attorney, an adjunct professor of law, and a former Wheaton City Councilwoman. Evelyn is committed to fighting for all Illinois residents. She will apply the same passion to her new role that has propelled her throughout her life, from humble beginnings in Hialeah, Florida, to becoming Illinois' first Latina Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. It is my deepest honor to be here with all of you today on Yom HaShoah. Governor Bruce Rauner really wishes he could be with all of us today, but he's on a trade mission, as you heard previously, in Poland, and will continue to build on the tremendous relationship between our two countries and to foster more business opportunities between Poland and the great state of Illinois. I know his thoughts and his spirits are with all of us today. However, as he has just completed visits to Auschwitz, where so many evil atrocities took place, as well as a site he recently visited in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. It's so important that we continue to remember the 6 million individuals that we have lost. And it's important that we stand strong together and united against evil and against hatred. I am so proud of the Holocaust survivors and the work and determination that they have put into rebuilding their lives here in Illinois and to make us a better state together. We want to thank Sheerit Hapleitah. I'm sorry, my emphasis lies with Spanish, but hopefully that's a good try. Hopefully I'll get an A for effort. I'd also like to thank the Jewish United Fund, Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, for all of the work that they do. And I also would like to thank the Jacob Synagogue for hosting us today. It is a great honor and a great pleasure to worship alongside all of you today so that we may always remember and we may never forget our survivors. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. Now we'd like to welcome our strong supporter, Honorable Mayor George Van Dusen of Skokie.
Good afternoon, and thanks to all of you for coming out this afternoon. If ever there were a time that we should remember, it's at this particular time as the baton of leadership is passing. This morning we were reminded of the passing of our dear friends. This past week, we also were reminded that our job is far from over. A new study was released by the Council on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, and its findings are very sobering. 31% of Americans and 41% of millennials think only 2 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Additionally, 11% of U.S. adults and 22% of millennials said they hadn't heard of or were not sure whether they had ever even heard of the Holocaust. 40% of adults and 66% of millennials could not identify Auschwitz as a Nazi concentration camp. Those are horrific numbers. Despite all of the efforts of all of us to create memorials, to never forget, our job is only beginning after all of these long years. I hope that the new generation of millennials who are taking the reins of leadership will never, ever forget and will not let our population across the country and across the world ever forget. Holocaust happens in Syria, and we must be aware that even in our own daytime, Holocaust continues, genocide continues. My thanks go to the organizers of today's Yom HaShoah, but let us continue our efforts together. Thank you so much for being here, and I applaud everybody's efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Now I'd like to welcome David Rubin, President of Skokie Valley at Good of Jacob.
Kvod HaRabbanim, honored guests, leaders of Sheerit Hapleitah, and most particularly to the Nitzilei HaShoah, the survivors of the Shoah, and your families. We welcome you, as always, our good and dear friends, to our synagogue, where you have honored us with your presence for over 3 decades on this solemn and important day of remembrance. Friends, when we gathered here just a year ago, there was much to cause us great concern. In our own country, we were witnessing the emergence from the shadows of political forces and voices aimed at sowing seeds of distrust, resentment, and hatred under a banner of populist nationalism. Across Europe, similar voices were being heard. In France, Marine Le Pen of the National Front, a party that has long traded in the twin tropes of xenophobia and anti-Semitism, was a serious candidate for president. And although she lost, she nonetheless garnered 34% of the vote. That's millions and millions of people. Standing here a year later, I'd like to say the news is better, except that it isn't. We've experienced Charlottesville and chants of blood and soil, and Jews will not replace us. We've seen a Holocaust denier and Nazi sympathizer, Arthur Jones, run unopposed and wind up as a Republican candidate for Congress here in the state of Illinois. Now, thankfully, the state GOP has unequivocally denounced this man. But there have been other instances where official reaction to instances of anti-Semitism has been more halting and ambiguous. In Europe, Islamist violence continues against Jews. In Hungary, where anti-Semitism is in the air, Viktor Orban, a far-right populist, is steering the country in very dangerous directions. In Poland, legislation seeks to whitewash the history of Polish complicity in the Holocaust. You know, Abraham Lincoln declared in 1862, "We cannot escape history," and yet that is exactly what is being attempted, whether from the far left or the right. Memory erased, our people in the Zionist enterprise in Israel vilified and condemned. So today, we come together to remember our martyrs and stand as witnesses We come together with a sense of heightened vigilance to the events around us, and not just things that touch us directly as Jews. We also stand with those who face the forces of murderous, genocidal hatred around the world, whether in Africa, the Middle East, or Myanmar. Lincoln was right. We cannot escape history, and we must not escape history, and we must use our own history as our guide and moral compass. We cannot turn away. Friends, despite these somber notes on a somber day, we have much to give thanks for. The Jewish people endure. We celebrate 70 years of national sovereignty in our land, while outside our land, despite our challenges, we see the green shoots of revitalized Jewish communities. This very shul standing as a wonderful example. We mourn those who were stolen from us. We strive to sanctify their memories with our actions. And for those of you, including the next generations who survived the war and the Nazi barbarism, we pledge to be worthy of the legacy of endurance, resilience, rebirth, and hope that you have handed down to all of us. May God continue to bless you and sustain you in life.
Thank you, David. Before we continue, there are quite a few people, young people, in the back who we would love to have you come sit in the front here, if you don't mind, so you can see better and perhaps hear better, and it's so good to see young people here. On that note, I want to welcome Rabbi Ari Hart, Rabbi of Skokie Valley of Gudath Jacob, to address us today.
I wish to thank Sheerit Hapleitah. It's a great honor to partner with you, your passionate and dedicated lay leadership who invest so much into this event and into preserving Shoah memory. And I want to thank all of you. Look around. Look how many people have come today on a cold and wet Sunday, a dreary day, have come out to take action. And that's what I want to focus my brief remarks on this morning, is action. Memory in Hebrew is zechirah. Zechirah. And zechirah in Judaism is not passive. It's not passively, oh, I remember something. No. Zechirah in Judaism is always active. Zechirah, to remember, always comes with action. It's always connected with a deed, with a prayer, with a song, with a food, with attending an event. Zechirah in Judaism always means doing something. Because without doing something, without action, memory fades. This today is Zechirah, coming together in this form, and especially all the young people. I want to ask all the young people, anyone under the age of 18, just to stand up. Stand up for a moment. I know we're not supposed to clap, but let's give them a round of applause. You may not understand this now, but you being here today is so vitally important. It is action. And your continued presence at these events and more is so vitally important for the future of our people, and I would argue for the future of the world. Now more than ever, we must remember, and we must remember with action. As Nazis march in Charlottesville, chanting "Jews will not replace us," as Islamists murder Holocaust survivors in France, now more than ever, we must remember. As the rates of forgetting, shared by Mayor Van Dusen, those very alarming statistics about the rates of forgetfulness amongst Americans, amongst the world, about what the Shoah was. As those rates increased, we must remember with action. We are still 2 million Jews fewer today than we were in 1939. We must remember. We must remember as genocide unfolds today, this very day, in Myanmar. We must remember. So by being here, we are taking action. And I want to encourage everybody to remember what you've heard here, especially the young people, and take it out. Take it out into the world. Make a difference. Fight for our people. Fight for the state of Israel. And by the way, I just have to mention, while the governor's in Poland, tell him to speak out against the horrific law that Poland just passed, making it a crime to speak out. It's a crime in Poland. It's a horrific law. They've passed a bill in Poland that it is illegal to say that Poland was complicit in the crimes of the Shoah, a fact that we all know is true. Effectively, Holocaust denial. The governor should speak about this and tell them that it's completely unacceptable. So we must all take action, and through our action, through our memory, may we merit to achieve the promise of never forget, of we will always remember. Thank you.
Okay, we'd like to begin our lighting of the memorial candles conducted by Sherry Rubenstein Warsaw along with Miriam Stern Hupsher. And Michael Heimlich will be accompanying them on the piano. I just want to ask that we have that aisle clear so people can come up that way. Why don't you come sit in front here? Thank you. Sherry.
Little boys.
Today, in lighting these candles, we observe our sacred obligation to remember our 6 million Jews who perished in the Shoah. We wish to reclaim the legacy of those victims, those whose names are forever lost in the Shoah. Seal Klein, a survivor of Auschwitz, along with her daughter Marilyn, will light our first candle. We light in memory of the 6 million Jews who died from starvation and torture and were murdered in the ghettos, forests, labor camps, death marches, extermination camps, POW camps, and transit camps all over Europe under German occupation. We remember. Doris Lazarus, whose parents survived ghettos, the camps of Auschwitz, Birkenau, Ravensbrück, Mauthausen, and Ebensee, along with her husband Ron, her daughter Jennifer, and granddaughters Talia and Perla, will light our second candle. We light in memory of all of the victims of the Shoah who perished in the ghettos of Warsaw, Krakow, Kielce, Lvov, Lodz, Vilna, Belzec, Białystok, Częstochow, Lublin, Radom, and all of the other towns and villages of Poland. We remember. Sisters Joyce and Polikoff and Ida Manning, whose parents survived the Kielce ghetto and concentration camps Sachsenhausen and Ravensbrück, will light our third candle. We light in memory of all of the victims of the Shoah who perished in the extermination camps of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Ravensbrück, Chelmno, Belzec, and Sobibor, and the victims of the concentration camps Gross Rosen, Dachau, Buchenwald, Mauthausen, and Stutthof. We remember. Tamara Zuperman, a survivor of the Odessa region of the Ukraine, along with her son Michael, will light our fourth candle. We light in memory of the Jewish victims of the former Soviet Union, Hungary, Lithuania, Romania, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, France, Latvia, Yugoslavia, Greece, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, who perished in the Shoah, as well as those killed in massacres in Kiev, Babi Yar, Vilnius, and other small towns and villages, and the victims of the Kielce pogrom after the war. We remember. Larry Schwartz and his friend Desi, whose parents survived Auschwitz, Buchenwald, and Dachau, will be lighting our fifth candle. We light in memory of all of the brave soldiers, the partisans, the freedom fighters, and the militia who served with the Allied forces, as well as those brave soldiers who liberated the camps, and for the righteous among the nations who risked and even gave their lives to help their fellow human beings. We remember. Our sixth and final candle will be lit by 3 generations. Kana Stolyar, a survivor of the Mogilev-Podolsk ghetto, with her daughter Florida and her grandchildren Larissa, Stan, and Eldar, and her great-grandchildren Ava and Ben. We light in memory of those lives and dreams and hopes that were put out before they even lived. For the 1.5 million Jewish children murdered, we remember. We light these candles to ensure the never-ending memories of the victims who died, whether Jew or Gentile. We light in memory of this lost generation and what they would have brought to the world in every walk of life. May we recall not only the terror of their deaths, but the splendor of their lives. We also light to honor those who survived the darkest hours of our history. The children who live today represent our future. It is not enough that we remember, but we must teach our children and our children's children to never forget. Please be seated.
We will now hear from Henry Jellum, the president of Sheerit Hapleitah, who has the very difficult task of following in the footsteps of Charlie.
Welcome all of you guests on the dais and you survivors. Now, you know, we say survivors is a very big general definition, but some of you were adults when you survived. Then we also have child survivors and children of survivors, hidden children. And you have the survivors from the Kindertransport, the ones that were transported from Europe to England. We also have children of survivors and grandchildren of survivors. So all of us are survivors. And of course, you, friends. This year we lost a number of our survivor communities, members of our survivor community, and a number of survivors who were parents of our group. And we lost a member of the second generation as well. Charlie Lipschitz, our dear president of Sheerit Hapleitah, Margot Schlesinger, who was a Schindler List Jude, Leah Mosak, Rosalie Schwartz, Adam Elster, who was the vice president of the Illinois Holocaust Memorial Museum, passed away just a few days ago. May their memory be for a blessing. Charlie, as he wanted to be called, in his wisdom asked us as the new leaders to continue with his work. And we will, and we have. I am a child of survivors. My parents were both from Poland. They escaped to Russia and survived the war in Siberia, where I was born. After Siberia, we were in displaced persons camps in January 1946, went to France in 1948, and waited for our papers to finally come to Chicago in 1955. Zachor, remember. Sheerit Hapleitah is an organization started by survivors over 65 years ago. They started Landsmannschaft groups of people from the same town, from the same country. They may have spoken Galiciana Yiddish or Lithuanian Yiddish, but they got together and they were familiar with each other's past. And they understood where they had gone, what they had gone through. Remember that these were survivors living in a strange country among people who did not even want to hear what they went through. Sheerit Hapleitah began to host a citywide yearly Holocaust memorial. Since none of the survivors knew where and when the loved ones were murdered, this memorial became a venue to say Kaddish and remember as a community. This yearly Yom HaShoah Remembrance Day was and continues to be a time for survivors and their families to mourn and remember together. Over the years, Sheerit Hapleitah continued to host the annual memorial and continued to run the separate affinity groups of survivors from distinct backgrounds. Then, in 1977, when the neo-Nazis wanted to march in Skokie, the separate groups coalesced. That event in our own backyard mobilized some of the survivors to come together and open the Holocaust Museum on Main Street. The museum's aim was to educate our neighbors about what the very real, very personal consequences of hatred had accomplished. The Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center grew from that small Main Street museum. That is the Holocaust Museum in Skokie. Now, when the survivors came to the United States, they did not look down, look glum. Through our modern eyes, we can look back and see that when these survivors landed here in our communities, most of them were deeply wounded by severe post-traumatic stress. And yet, they were not paralyzed. These survivors stood up, worked hard, raised families. We are their children. The second generation, we are doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers, social workers, nurses, and officers in the service of America. And our parents in this country gave us the gift of opportunity and education. And we were handed something else as well. From our parents, we inherited their pain and trauma, but not paralysis. We were handed a legacy and a duty to remember. Zachor. We, the second and third generations, took on a new catchphrase. Never again. We thought that when we said never again, we referred to what had happened to our parents and grandparents between 1939 and 1945. Never again was a pledge to remember our own trauma and be those who remind others so that nothing like this should ever happen again and to anybody else, to us or to anybody else. But much like the neo-Nazis wanting to march in Skokie, this mobilized our parents to unite and speak louder than the hatred. We also must mobilize, to counter the present anti-Semitism and hatred against us and others. When we pick up the newspapers, we see the same things you do, and it's very scary. Mayor Van Dusen mentioned to you one of the items. Never again, what about? As reported in Newsweek, this more than a dozen Jewish student events were violently disrupted this year at schools coast to coast, including Boston University. University of Maryland and University of Florida, and at the University of California campuses, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic graffiti reading, Zionists should be sent to the gas chambers, has appeared on the walls of buildings, and a UCLA student impartiality on a judicial board was questioned due to her involvement in the Jewish community. Never again? What about in Germany about 2017? They counted over 600 attacks on Jews and Jewish spaces. In Berlin, Wenzel Michalski pulled his son Solomon out of public school after two boys shot at Solomon with a BB gun and choked him until he lost consciousness, while others looked on and laughed. Never again? What about the magazine The Atlantic noted the dark consequences of Poland's new Holocaust law? The country is stifling open discussion of war crimes and jeopardizing its own standing in the world stage. Never again. What about mass murder and destruction in Myanmar? Sent some 680,000 people fleeing for their lives in Bangladesh. Their own military, which was supposed to protect them, was murdering their families. Sounds familiar? All of our pursuers over the millennia have disappeared. You had the Romans, the Greeks, Persians, Nazis of the Third Reich. But remember, we are still here. What is the message that I'm trying to leave you today? Jewish resistance led to a reclaiming of personal dignity, and we honor to all who resisted, physically and spiritually, those who perished and those who survived. How would we have encountered such horrors? First, we were shorn of our possessions. Then we were shorn of our dignity. Then we were shorn of our lives. We imagine ourselves as if we had personally, each of us, experienced the Shoah. Would we have had the strength and courage? May I suggest that one important thing is not to close our windows and doors and hope that the resurgence of violence against us and other minorities will go away. Our parents taught us better than that. We must fight. We must speak out. We must help organizations that are on the front line fighting anti-Semitism and promoting awareness so that never again will really be never again against us or others. What organizations? Well, we have a few organizations right on this dais. Israel, providing the world with science, technology, Menschlichkeit, being a light unto the nations. State of Illinois was fighting BDS and opening business opportunities between Illinois and Israel. Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago, the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center right in Skokie, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, Stand With Us, Simon Wiesenthal Center. You choose what organizations you feel comfortable working with or support them so that they can function. They need us, but we need them. Zachor, we are here to remember. Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people live. We are here. Anachnu po. Mezenen du.
Now we'll hear from a representative of one of our community partners, representing the Jewish United Fund of Metropolitan Chicago, Bill Silverstein, who is the chair of the Jewish Community Relations Council.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to bring greetings and appreciation on behalf of the Jewish United Fund, Jewish Federations of Metropolitan Chicago. This is a truly sacred event that JUF has been proud to support every year. This program is incredibly significant. Sheerit Hapleitah performs a profound service for our community in honoring the memory of the 6 million, and it is humbling to be part of it each year. Both as individuals and as a community, we remember the men and women and children, the grandparents, the parents, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunts, whose lives were so cruelly taken. We do not forget them. We must never forget them. Though not all of their names are known, and though not all of them are remembered personally, we remember them all as members of our family, of our people. We are gathering at a time that we must recognize never again is now. When we think of never again, we think never again shall it be a Holocaust, but we must always remember that never again means never again to anti-Semitism, bigotry, hate, or the delegitimization of Israel, which, let's be clear, is anti-Semitism. These factors are unfortunately present in our world. We've seen an alarming increase in anti-Semitism in the last several years. Last August, we watched in disbelief as neo-Nazis and white supremacists marched in Charlottesville, North Carolina. We were stunned when a local synagogue had to evacuate not only Shabbat service attendees, but the community's Torahs, as there was fear of arson. Attacks on Jews and Jewish institutions have risen more than 60% in the last 2 years nationally. And across Europe, the warning bells are ringing. Jews are advised to avoid wearing items identifying their religion. Security guards are stationed outside synagogues and Jewish schools. Many Jews question whether they have a future in their very own home country. Most recently, we are mourning Muriel Knoll, an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor who was murdered in her Paris apartment in March for only one reason: she was Jewish. She was the 11th Jew murdered in France since 2006 because of their religious identity. Now more than ever, our Jewish Federation remains committed to supporting and sustaining our aging survivor community. Our agencies continue to provide housing, food, and medical services and meet survivors' other needs. We estimate there are roughly 6,000 survivors living in the Chicago community. But what's stunning is that roughly 1/3 of that population lives below the national poverty line. Federation is allocating millions of dollars to that community to help rise their standard of living and rising their dignity. In March of 2017, we put on a performance called Defiant Requiem. It was a Verdi concert that was performed in Theresienstadt by the Jewish prisoners to the Nazi guards. We revived it in Chicago last year, and through the benefit, we raised $4.2 million. Every single nickel is going to our survivor community in Chicago. JOF is also providing vital education initiatives to ensure that the lessons of the worst genocide in recorded human history are not forgotten. Our schools and supplementary educational programs focus on the lessons of the Holocaust and teach real-life skills so that students can be upstanders against hate. One of those programs is called Right On for Israel. Roughly 50 juniors in high school throughout our public high schools in Chicago attend an advocacy 2-year program where they learn to advocate for Israel and advocate against anti-Semitism. They then graduate and go on to colleges throughout the country, and they became our voices for advocacy for Israel and for Jewish causes. Our public affairs professionals build alliances with civic religious community leaders as we face down bigots and speak up for the vulnerable. Never again means not here and not now. Whether it's hate directed against us or any act of hate committed against any person or any institution in any city and any country. We will not stand idly by as hate tears at the fabric of our great nation. Every day, but especially on Yom HaShoah, we remember the 6 million Jews of Europe who were murdered in the Holocaust. As we remember, we recommit to being a light unto the nations and making sure that the meaning of never forget is actually never forgotten. Thank you.
Now we'd like to welcome Honorable Aviv Ezra, the Consul General of Israel.
Dear Holocaust survivors, distinguished guests, and Sheerit Hapleitah management, thank you very much for having me here today. Several weeks ago, as we sat down at our Seder tables, we read how in each generation there are those who seek to destroy the Jews as a people. This was certainly true in ancient times, from Amalek to Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Romans. Later in the Middle Ages, there were the expulsions from England and France, the ruthless Inquisition, and the horrible pogroms. But the most recent attempt to exterminate us, and the most systematic and nearly successful onslaught, occurred not thousands or even hundreds of years ago, but rather in the generations of our parents and our grandparents. The murder of one out of every 3 Jews in the world was unprecedented, even by our people's tragic standards, a catastrophe that would have extinguished the ability or even the will of most of any other people to survive. Yet at the Seder, we also learned that we did survive. Moreover, we drew ourselves up from oppression of slavery and emerged as free people. We learned to redefine ourselves not as victims, but as masters of our own destiny. We learned to defend ourselves by ourselves from enemies mightier than we. Yet after the Holocaust, this was by no means certain. First, there were the theological challenges. How could a God portrayed as loving his people remain passive while millions of his people were tortured, shot, and gassed? In the Passover story, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but in the Second World War, God hardened the heart of the world. But there was also the physical question. Reduced to a mere 13 million people, scattered all over the world, demoralized, how can we Jews remain a united, vital people? To paraphrase Ezekiel, could our dry bones rise again? After Auschwitz and Birkenau, could we Jews ever again be a home? Then, a mere 3 years after the Nazi surrender, in one of the most epic and inspiring events in human history, the same devastated people proclaimed their independence in the land of their forefathers, the land of Israel. But still the question persisted. At Passover, we are encouraged to ask questions, and here are some that we must ask ourselves. Had Israel existed in 1939, and the gates to Zion being open wide rather than closed shut, would those same 6 million have lived? If Jews had the sovereign means to defend themselves, would they have been so methodically massacred? Would other Jewish communities in the former Soviet Union, in Ethiopia, and others have survived if not for the state of Israel? Though we can never replace those lost, would the number of Jewish people have been restored without Israel, the fastest growing Jewish community in the world? Would Jewish learning have thrived without the vibrant academias of Israel? And would the Hebrew language be spoken today by more people than at any time in history? And while some argue today that certain Israeli policies alienate young American Jews, can anyone seriously doubt Israel's vast impact in strengthening Jewish identity worldwide over the past 70 years? Can anyone doubt the transformative role that Israel has played in the lives of more than 250,000 Jewish youth who have spent 10 days in Israel as part of Birthright program? And finally, what would the Jewish world look like today, we have to ask, if the state of Israel had not emerged from the ashes of the Holocaust in May 1948? It is fitting then that Holocaust Remembrance Day falls between Passover, the holiday of questions, and Israel Independence Days, our celebration of answers. Of course, even the miracle of Israel cannot furnish us with all the answers, no more than the horrors of Holocaust enable us to articulate all of our questions. We know, for example, that Israel continues to face existential threats, that the covenant of Hamas calls not only for Israel's destruction, but the murder of all Jews everywhere. We all know that Nazis killed 6 million of us in 6 years, and Iranian leaders vowed to kill a similar number of us in Israel in as many minutes. In every generation, there arises those who seek to destroy us, and this generation is no exception. The difference, my friends, is that today, as opposed to 1939 and as opposed to 1492, we have a strong and resilient state for the Jewish people. Thank you. We have a flourishing democracy, a cutting-edge economy, and an unbreakable alliance with the world's greatest power, the United States of America. The Holocaust Remembrance Day commands us to remember our unspeakable losses. But on this day, we must not forget our innumerable strength. Many talked about the never again. And I want to say that for us, never again does not mean that we believe that Jews might never find themselves in reoccurrence of hatred and anti-Semitism. Rather, for us, for me, the statement never again means the following: never again being defenseless again, and never again being stateless. My friends, though threatened, we will not be victims. Though we grieve, we will also be galvanized by hope. Today, my friends, we do not merely survive. Today, we thrive. Thank you very much.
We are honored to welcome today Dr. Julian Unger Sargon. Dr. Unger is Deputy Commander of the Indiana Guard Reserve's 19th Medical Regiment and serves as its Executive Officer. Dr. Julian Unger Sargon, MD, PhD, is a practicing neurologist in Indiana with an interest in interventional pain management. He trained in the UK at the Royal London Hospital Medical College and was awarded the George Riddick Prize in Neurology. Having been awarded many fellowships and grants, Dr. Unger Sargon became an instructor at Harvard Medical School and co-director of the Neurophysiology Lab at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. He also has degrees in music from the Royal Academy of Music in London and a Master's of Theological Studies from Harvard Divinity School. Welcome, Dr. Unger Sargon.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor, Rabbi, dignitaries. My right leg is totally numb, and I'm sure people who are my age would love to just stand up. Please, everyone stand. I want you to shake the right leg of its sciatic. Come on, let's do this. And shake the left leg. I want you to raise your arms and get those shoulders moving. Get some oxygen. I'm a physician, this is medically advised. Take a deep breath in and out. In and out. Everyone who's under 18 to come up to the front and sit right in front of me, because this is addressed to you. Everything else has already been said. Anyone under 18, please come to the front. Boy Scouts. Third generation. Come on, everyone under 18, come and sit in the front. Larry, first slide. I don't know if you know, but in the scientific worlds of sociology, psychology, you are known as the 3 Gs, the third generations. That's how they're calling you. So I'm addressing this to all of you, 3 Gs. Fourth generation. How many here are from the survivors? Hands up. And how many are here are children of survivors? And children of survivors? Oh my gosh. And fourth generation. Wow. Can we all say that verse together? Can everyone say it together? Does everyone read with me? Lama natseach al ayelet hashachar. Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. This is Psalm 22, written by David. He's asking that question, and that question has been asked in the history of Jewish and Christian literature. Why have you forsaken me? That question I will leave with you at the end of my very short talk. Next slide. I serve as a medical director for the Global PTSD Foundation, dedicated to helping vets find better ways to manage their trauma and lives. And in the same time, I am part of this medical regiment. I'm honored to serve in it to help in the event of mass casualty and natural disasters. Next. So I deal a lot with combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder, and already in the medical literature, we are seeing that gets transmitted to the next generation. Next. The question is there transmission of Holocaust trauma from parent to child? Next. And there have been models of traumatic transmission. I just want to focus on number 4. That's what interests me. The recent claim that genetics plays a role. This new field is called epigenetics and is taking center stage in medical research into other diseases as well. Next. And so you can have and especially from the work of Professor Yehuda at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, she started looking at pregnant women following 9/11 to see what was going on after they delivered and to look at those factors. And she also looked at Holocaust survivors in the town of Cleveland. She noted that trauma caused changes to the survivors' DNA, which were then transmitted to their children. Here was hard evidence, as yet to be confirmed and as yet challenged by other laboratories, that changes to the brain hippocampus was actually being transmitted epigenetically from survivors to children. Wow. Next. So that is why, on Erev Pesach this year, despite the fact that we were invited to our children, so there was no need for any food in our kitchen because we were going to be taken care of, at 3 o'clock on Erev Pesach, before the Seder, I opened the fridge, and to my horror, it was more or less empty. There was a can of orange juice, milk, and cheese to let us get up next morning, but then we were going to go to the kids to eat. It was empty, I tell you. I had a full-blown panic attack over the claims of Sarah telling me, we're taken care of for Yom Tov. I called Kol Tuv Grocery, and they were still open for another 10 minutes. Yes, I got into my car, and I went to Kol Tuv and grabbed everything on the shelf to fill that fridge. Anyone here relate to that? Thank you. So this presentation really is an invitation into my own spiritual journey as I grapple with the question, Lama Azavtani? Why? It starts with my father, who witnessed the Anschluss and saw Hitler march through the streets of his beloved Vienna in 1938. And as part of the Kindertransport, who here is from the Kindertransport? Wow. He got out with 2,000 children on that fateful train, leaving his parents and sister, becoming a refugee and arriving in England at the same time becoming an alien in a strange land. Then being told he was an enemy alien class B, where they were sent either to Canada or the Isle of Man. He was sent to Australia with 2,000 Jewish refugees in the hold of a ship to be interned for 2.5 years with nothing but bread and Australian butter. Want to know why I need a fridge full of food? So I grew up in post-war United Kingdom. I was born 5 years after the Holocaust. And my father's silence whenever I asked him about his absent family. I had no family on my father's side. And my absent grandparents and Aunt Litzy, I couldn't make out. He wouldn't respond. I now realize that was based on that fateful day at the Bahnhof in Vienna, where he had to say goodbye to his parents and sister, never to see them again. I now realize that that unconscious sense of betrayal and guilt cast him into decades of silence, and the question as to why he survived alone haunts him like it does you to this day. My school teachers, who were all survivors themselves, likewise were unwilling, if not angry, when we asked questions in the 1960s in this Orthodox Jewish London day school. The only people to respond were our rabbis, and we were fed with the classical response, Umipnei chatoenu, because of our sins. Because of our sins. That brought me to adolescence. Next slide. Silence and rage. Where does an adolescent go to begin his search, to ask the question why and try and seek an answer? To the library, of course, my second home. And who were my teachers? In the 70s, it was Richard Rubinstein, Emil Fackenheim, Elie Wiesel, Soloveitchik, and even Simone Weil, all of whom framed the question why, even though not providing any answers. And I was also fortunate to live in Finchley, where older friends would meet to discuss the goodness of the divine and the notion of theodicy, and the impact of the Holocaust on our faith. These Shabbat meetings were vital for me in honing my skills in critical thinking. There was one thinker, next slide, who you may remember because he was the rabbi in this shul when he came from England. He came from Berlin to Leeds to this shul and then became a professor at theological college, Eliezer Berkowitz, who wrote a book, Faith After the Holocaust, and at age 15, that really helped me in providing a response to the question why. The notion of Hester Ponim. This is a different notion than Umitnei Chatoenu, not because of our sins, but because at critical times in history, God hides his face as he promised he would in Deuteronomy. And at least that was not the pat answer that I got. But it wasn't until I arrived in Jerusalem at age 18 to Merkaz HaRav Kook that I was able to spend my gap year immersed in the thought of the greatest intellectual giant, Rav Kook, who was a blend of the old Lithuanian yeshiva world of Volozhin with the progressive thought of the 20th century and Zionism. My problem with his vision of Hitchalta de Geulta, and the consul will forgive me, that the state of Israel was the beginning of the Geula, and his notion, remember he died in 35, before the Holocaust, was the way it was misused by politicians for their narrative, which was, for me, it seemed obscene to think that millions of Jews had to die as a price for a piece of real estate to be called a homeland. And even more, the validation of Jewish sacrifice was focused on, Henry, resistance fighters, lochamei ghetto, and partisans, whilst ignoring the masses of Jews who were helpless and went like sheep to the slaughter, as if they had a choice. On returning to my studies in England, I was moved, therefore, by a different model, and that is the psychological works of Erich Fromm, C.G. Jung, and James Hillman, all of whom, for me, uncovered the dark side of the Western imagination, the dark side of the unconscious, and provided me a vocabulary with which to understand the demonic forces of Western civilization and explain how they could play Beethoven and sing Schiller poems in the camps, how this took place in the most civilized society of Europe, how repressed centuries of anti-Semitism was unleashed, locked and loaded for so long. This psychodynamic and mythic approach led me to re-evaluate my tradition and rabbinic thought and find solace, of all places, in the protest parables of Eicha Rabbah. And if you remember, Eicha is the book of Lamentations that we say on Tisha B'Av, written some 300 years after the first destruction. And Eicha Rabbah is the Midrash written 500 years later, processing what took place. And in those protest mishalim, the rabbis talk about the punishment not fitting the crime. And I found solace in those rabbis dealing with the catastrophe of the Khurban, hoping that I could project a trajectory that might explain what took place in the Shoah, thereby holding the tension between faithfully following the tradition and yet all the while holding the divine to the same moral standard. Might this be a trajectory for a post-Holocaust theology? Wiesel certainly employed it in his novels. Remember The Trial of God? And as the Beit Din pronounced the verdict that God is guilty, the judges arose and proclaimed, "Nu, it's time to daven mincha." It wasn't until I was older and introduced, next slide, to the life and thought of Reb Shlomo Carlebach, when my heart melted as he spoke about Torah, and then that famous visit to that godforsaken place, Krakow, in 1988. And instead of rage, hatred, anger, and silence, I found myself crying as he sang his Torah and the Torah spoke through his songs. It was as if a new voice of healing appeared that defied all that philosophical back and forth I had struggled with, as he pointed us to a new Torah, a Torah of love, the revolution in the Jewish thought that was the Baal Shem Tov. He literally introduced the Western world to non-Chabad Hasidism. In studying Polish Hasidut, Reb Tzadok and Reb Nachman, I finally found expression of that Lurianic concept of the dark side of life and the catastrophe that is built in to the very creation that the depth psychologist had informed me previously. Finding the dark side within myself and seeing it as part of a larger fault line in the Kabbalistic universe was of great relief.
After the Holocaust, it's so easy to be angry at the world, and it's so easy to condemn the world, but we have to continue to love the world. We have to.
In response to the Holocaust, Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach stressed the power of joy and the ability of every individual to become God's partner in fixing the world.
The most important thing today every person has to do is cleanse their hearts from anger. And the only way of getting rid of anger is when you fill your heart with a lot of joy.
Carlebach and Wiesel gave us the vocabulary by which to approach the Shoah through their storytelling and not philosophical answers to why. In this space, we were able to somehow feel the pain and the trauma. In this space, for the first time, there was healing, but theirs was quite different responses.
There is an urge on you to curse, to be angry, and say, come on, you must be angry at those who committed these crimes, and that there must be a way of healing.
What did you do with your anger?
The anger here is in me, hate not. I'm against hatred. I write and I teach. And my goal is, in both cases, to sensitize the reader or the student. And what does one feel when one is here looking? One feels that those who committed these crimes had no feeling.
Yes. That was a different kind of human being that could do this. I don't know what
But
that
they
is.
were human. They had two eyes.
Yeah.
They had love for their families. They loved music and culture and paintings. And yet, look what they have done. And therefore, I believe anger must be a catalyst. When am I angry? When I witness injustice and I feel helpless. That's when I'm angry. I'm helpless.
Between Elie Wiesel's sense of the impotence and rage and Carlebach's love as the antidote to hatred, I was moved by the next phase of my theological trajectory. Is the sound working? Okay, let's go to the next slide. And that was the process of demystification. I used to think that there was a gap between all the analysis and the facts of history and the sociology of the 20th century provided by wonderful historians such as Goldhagen and Hilberg, and that the monstrosity of Auschwitz, like others, resorted to the theological notion of evil. It's the work of the devil, the Satan, the Sitra Achra, and the concept of the Nazi as Amalek. And that gap between the insufficiency of all the Treaty of Versailles and the German nation feeling despondent and the Hitler's psychology and his makeup and all that stuff always for me fell short of the monstrosity of what took place. And so I filled it with theological notions, Mipnei Chatoenu, Hester Ponim, theology of evil, the Kabbalistic universe of the Cholol HaPoneh, all those concepts to fill that gap. Then came my crisis and realized, how are we going to transmit that to the next generation? Evil is just evil. You can't analyze it. You make it unexplainable if you just call it evil. And after all the literature and all the books and speeches, this gap had to be filled with something other than the transcendent, a mystery, as we transmit the lessons to our children. And thanks to the work of Hannah Arendt and the Eichmann trial and post-critical theory, evil as a theological notion is unhelpful to prevent more genocide. Evil is banal. It was the bureaucracy made of thousands of pen-pushing secretaries and apparatchiks of the state that moved the death machine along to its ultimate success, as Claude Lanzmann showed us eloquently in 9 hours of Shoah. The gap must be filled, not with theology, but with rational thought. Even the Shoah, now 70 years later with 4 generations, must be subjected to critical analysis to prevent its reoccurrence, which brought me to the work, next slide, of Yehuda Bauer. Yehuda Bauer's work and the Israeli revisionist historians refused to see the facts of the Shoah in light of military resistance alone, also saw the roles of the victims, the capos, the Judenrat, the collaborators with the perpetrators. And that brought me to the notion of spiritual resistance, not just physical military resistance, the partisans, and they are very important, and we have validated and promoted them for 70 years. What about spiritual resistance? What about Izzy Stark baking a matzah in the work camp, having had to give up bread rations for 3 months? The woman who traded her cigarettes in Poland for a matzah. The Beis Yaakov girls who studied in the Lodz ghetto despite it being illegal. The Satmarov who Ringelbaum in the diarist tells us in Bergen-Belsen sat night after night praying for his people. And the last dance, next slide, of the Piasetzner Rebbe with his Hasidim knowing that they were being sent to Treblinka. A new type of educational museum that resists the easy notion of fulfilling our American Jewish identity by merely identifying with the State of Israel unconditionally and uncritically, or housing Holocaust museums throughout our land. A museum that refuses to show naked women in a voyeuristic manner about to be shot, robbing them of their final dignity. And most importantly, the unearthing, next slide, of the manuscripts of the Holy Piasetzner Rebbe in the Warsaw Ghetto, week by week, as he saw the end coming and still wrote Torah. This is spiritual resistance that must be remembered too. Who taught the Torah of protest that I had been seeking for decades in my Midrash studies? Here he was. And I end with the following. Kiddush Hashem is only when you have a choice. The martyrs were Kedoshim. They didn't do Kiddush Hashem. They had no choice. They were Kedoshim. After the war, if you can stay a Yid and you can keep your faith despite everything and maintain your tradition and teach those holy children here sitting in the front, that's the Kiddush Hashem that will give those who we validate, memorialize, and give them the final deserving memory and not give Hitler another victory. Thank you so much.
We'd now like to call up to read the legacy in Russian and in English, and the acceptance in Russian and in English. Hanna Stolyar, a survivor from Ukraine. Ida Pollock, a Jewish child survivor from Poland. Florita Stolyar, a second-generation survivor from Ukraine, and Rachel Goldberg, a fourth-generation survivor from Germany.
Мы приносим эту клятву. Мы принимаем ее в отблесках пламени, оставившего шрамы на душах нашего народа. Мы клянемся именами ушедших родителей и детей. Мы клянемся со скрытой печалью и возродившейся верой. Мы клянемся, что священная память о погибших 6 миллионах никогда не сотрется из наших сердец. Мы видели их в голоде и страхе. Мы видели их рвущимися в бой. Мы видели их в одиночество ночи, сохраняющими свою веру. На пороге смерти мы видели их. В тишине мы слышим их молчание. Их слезы соединились с нашими. Депортации, казни, массовые захоронения, лагеря смерти, немые молитвы, призывы к восстанию, отчаяние, разорванные святые писания, города и поселки, деревни и местечки, молодые и старые, богатые и бедные, воины и партизаны, ученые и мечтатели, растерянные лица и поднятые кулаки. Все исчезло, как дым. Мы приносим эту клятву. То, что видели они, стало словами, передающимися от отца к сыну, от матери к дочери, из поколения в поколение. Помните, что сделали с нашим народом немецкие убийцы и их пособники. Помните о них с яростью и презрением. Помните, что безразличный мир сделал нами себе. Помните о жертвах с гордостью и печалью. Помните также о делах праведников мира. Мы также будем помнить чудо еврейского возрождения на земле наших предков в независимом государстве Израиль. Здесь первопроходцы и бойцы вернули нашему народу достоинство и величие нации. Из руин наших жизней сироты и вдовы построили на освобожденной земле дома и крепости. До конца наших дней мы будем помнить всех тех, кто лелеял и воплощал свою и нашу мечту вернуться за великие высоты. Мы приносим эту клятву здесь и сейчас, в нашем вечном духовном пристанище. Пусть же наше наследие будет таким же вечным, как стена плача, ибо здесь горят молитвы и воспоминания. Они горят, и никогда не исчезнут.
The legacy. We take this oath, we take it in a shadow of flames whose tongues scar the soul of our people. We vow in the name of dead parents and children, we vow with our sadness hidden, our faith renewed, we vow we shall never let the sacred memory of our perished 6 million be scorned or erased. We saw them hungry and in fear. We saw them rush to battle. We saw them in loneliness of night, true to their faith. At the threshold of death, we saw them. We received their silence in silence and merged their tears with ours. Deportation, execution, mass graves, death camps, mute prayers, cries of revolt, desperation, torn scrolls, cities and towns, villages and hamlets, the young, the old, the rich, the poor, ghetto fighters and partisans, scholars and messianic dreamers, ravaged faces, fists raised, like clouds of fire, all have vanished. We take this oath, vision becomes word, to be handed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, from generation to generation. Remember what the German killer and their compliances did to our people. Remember them with rage and contempt. Remember what the indifferent world did to us and to itself. Remember the victim with pride and with sorrow. Remember also the deeds of the righteous Gentiles. We shall also remember the miracle of Jewish rebirth in the land of our ancestors, in the independent state of Israel. Here, pioneer fighters return to our people the dignity and majesty of nationhood. From the ruins of our lives, orphan and widow built homes and old new fenced fortresses on our redeemed land. To the end of our days, we shall remember all those who realized and raised their dream, our dream of redemption, to the loftiest heights. We take this oath here in Jerusalem, our eternal spiritual sanctuary. Let our legacy endure as a stone of the temple wall. For here prayer and memories burn. They burn and will not be consumed.
Мы принимаем на себя обязательства. Мы – это поколение, рожденное после темных времен. Через воспоминания и слова наших родителей, дедушек, бабушек, мы связаны с той еврейской сущностью, которую пытались уничтожить и которая пропитана наше сознание. Мы приносим эту клятву вам, всем тем, кто пострадал, и всем тем, кто выжил, нашим дедушкам, бабушкам, сожженным в нацистском пламени, нашим уничтоженным братьям и сестрам, более чем миллиону безжалостно убитых еврейских детей, всем 6 миллионам, чей несгибаемый дух и сопротивление даже в лагерях и гетто служат для нашего народа образцом приверженности к жизни. Мы клянемся помнить. Мы научим наших детей сохранять еврейский дух, который невозможно уничтожить. Мы расскажем миру о той глубине, на которую может пасть человечество, и о той высоте, которой мы достигли, даже находясь в сущем аду. Мы будем бороться против антисемитизма, всех проявлений расовой ненависти и за свободу во всем мире. Мы подтверждаем свою приверженность государству Израиль и поддержке еврейской жизни на нашей родной земле. Мы клянемся служить единству еврейского народа. Мы, ваши дети и внуки, мы здесь.
We accept the obligation of this legacy. We are the generations born after the darkness. Through our parents' and grandparents' memories, words, and silence, we are linked to that annihilated Jewish existence whose echoes permeate our consciousness. We dedicate this pledge to you, our parents and grandparents who suffered and survived, to our grandparents who perished in the flames, to our vanished brothers and sisters, more than 1 million Jewish children so brutally murdered, to all 6 million whose unyielding spiritual and physical resistance, even in the camps and ghettos, exemplifies our people's commitment to life. We pledge to remember. We shall teach our children to preserve forever that an uprooted Jewish spirit which could not be destroyed. We shall tell the world of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights which we attained, even in hell itself. We shall fight anti-Semitism and all forms of racial hatred by our dedication to freedom throughout the world. We affirm our commitment to the State of Israel and to the furtherance of Jewish life in our homeland. We pledge ourselves to the oneness of the Jewish people. We are your children and your grandchildren. We are here.
The future is here. We'd like to welcome Noah Roth and Tova Kahan, students at Ida Crown Jewish Academy, who are also interns of the Yad Vashem Museum of Israel.
Tova and I would like to thank Sheerit Hapleitah for organizing this courageous remembrance ceremony of grave importance. In Sefer Devarim, where Moshe is reviewing the commandments that will help Bnei Israel thrive in the future, Moshe says the following: Zachor et asher asah lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek has done to you. Here, Moshe is telling Bnei Israel that it is not up to us to assign reasons for history, whether it be of hardship or growth. However, it is up to us to derive lessons from history and learn from what happened to us in order to utilize and transform the future. The severity of the Holocaust makes its lessons, both those for humanity and those for the Jewish nation, all the more profound. One of these lessons is that of pride among the Jewish nation. During the Holocaust, the Nazi regime worked to destroy a nation through the demoralization of individuals, yet the Jewish nation persevered by our very existence and maintained our identity throughout the systematic persecution. Whether through physical, spiritual, or religious resistance, the Jews of the time were able to maintain their identity and pride. As we remember the Holocaust and the 6 million innocent Jews who were murdered on this day, let us also remember those who resisted the Nazi oppression, whether through physical force or through their very own existence.
The internship that Noah and I take part in is centered around building a relationship with a survivor and getting to know them as a person rather than focusing on their experience during the war. I feel that this is a major responsibility of mine as part of the last generation that will have the opportunity to get to know survivors. It is our duty to keep the legacy of these survivors alive and testify to the memory of their experiences. This is the only way to keep the lessons of the Holocaust alive moving forward. As part of my internship with Yad Vashem, I had the opportunity to visit the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center with a few other interns and our coordinator. On our visit, I noticed a monument outside, bearing the phrase, "Remember the past, transform the future." For me, this motto perfectly captures the importance of Holocaust education. The tragedy that has befallen our people does not only teach lessons on a national level, but on a global level. As modern Jews living in the shadow of this event, we have an obligation to show the world at large the importance of critical thinking and action in the face of injustice. The global community responded to the horror of the Holocaust with never again, and yet atrocities continue to occur around the world. The only way to prevent future atrocities is to speak out against injustice and take a stand for those in need of our protection. May we all take a lesson from our tragic past and use it to transform the future, truly fulfilling the promise of never again.
We welcome Cantor Pavel Reitman.
I'm honored to be here today, both as Chazan of Beth Hillel Congregation B'nai Emunah in Wilmette, and also as a Russian Jew who comes from the family of Holocaust survivors. It says in your program that I come with a music ensemble. Unfortunately, our kids couldn't make it today, so I'm hoping that you could help me to create the ensemble as I sing a couple of songs that many of you would surely know. Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רשרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם. My God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters,
waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart. Eli, Eli, shelo yigamer leolam. על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על ביתנו התינוקת, שמור לי הטוב, על האש המבוערת, על המים חזקים, על האיש השב הביתה מן המרחקים. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על נטע כל נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה. אשיבנו ואשובה אל הארץ הטובה. שמור לי על זה הבית, על הגן, על החומה, מיגון, מפחד פתע וממלחמה. שמור על המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הטף, על הפרי שלו הבשילות ושנאסף. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נא לי אלי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על נטע כל נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה. אשיבנו ואשובה אל הארץ הטובה. תודה רבה לכולם.
Before Larry Schwartz, the president of the Association of Descendants of the Shoah of Illinois, speaks to you, I'd like to ask you to look to the screens at the end of our program, because we're going to have a special video program there, the way that Yom HaShoah was commemorated in Israel by some very special people. And after our program, for Holocaust Remembrance Day, Kulam invited 600 Holocaust survivors, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to sing together in a special project of Beit Avichai together with Zikaron Ba Salom. We'll see that video at the end of our program. Now I'd like to ask Larry Schwartz to speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you as President of the Association of Descendants of the Shoah. I'm very happy to see you all. Stretch your neck, turn around, look around you. You have people who are family members, people who you've never met, people who look familiar. These are your current family. As we lose our survivors from the community, we are still strong and we will remain strong. And I want to thank the many people from our dais, Henry for filling some huge shoes. And I want to remind you that this program continues because we have such leadership and we have you that we're doing this for. And please continue to join us and please continue to participate and join us in the leadership efforts to make this continue to happen. Thank you very much.
Okay, Chazan Reitman will be leading us in memorial prayer and Kaddish and the Partisaner hymn. Please rise.
ותדפק לדם שנשפך כמים המצא מנוחה נכונה על כנפיך השכינה במעלות קידושים ותחורים כזוהר הרקיע מירים ומזכירים לנשמותיהם של רבבות אלפים אנשים ונשים ילדים וילדות שנחרבו ושנשחטו ונשרפו ונחקנו ונקברו חיים בארצות אשר נגע בכן יד הצורר הגרמני וגרוריו כולם קדושים וטהורים בגן עדן בגן עדן הם ינוחדם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתרם בסדר כנפיך לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם עד השם ונחלתם ינוחו בשלום על משכבם ונאמר יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחיי חון וביומי חון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ימרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן ועלמה וימרו אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל וימרו אמן. Sag nicht kein Molas, du gehst dem letzten Weg, wenn Himmeln bleine verstellen bläutig, kommen wenn noch unser Reis gegemte schon, so wird abheugt und unser Trott min Sehnen da, kommen wenn noch unser Reis gedämmte schon, se veda poikt und unser Trott min Zähnen da. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht kein Liedl von a Fegel auf der Frei. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallen die gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hand. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallen die gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die hand.
Just before you leave, we are going to shoot a video, so please sit down. We also, after the video, for those of you who want, we will have a mincha service right across the way. Thank you. Thank you very much. And this is a miracle that you are here, that we are all here from what we said today and from what we see here. All this is a miracle.